Resuming debate, the honourable member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to stand here in this place today and speak to the Conservative Opposition Day motion introduced in the House, which calls for the House to order, and I quote, "The Government, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, SDTC, and the Auditor General of Canada, each to deposit with the Law Clerk and Parliamentary Council within 14 days, although I understand an amendment has been made, of the adoption of this order, the following documents created or dated since January 1st, 2017, which are in its or her possession, custody, or control." It goes on to detail the nature of the documents and the process for attaining them, and ultimately the submission of these documents to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for, and I quote, "its independent determination of whether to investigate potential offences under the Criminal Code or any other Act of Parliament." And before I go any further, Madam Speaker, I will note that I am splitting my time with my colleague, the MP for St. Albert, Edmonton. As you are aware, Madam Speaker, earlier this week, the Auditor General of Canada tabled 3 damning reports in the House of Commons, including report number 6, Sustainable Development Technology Canada. Under this scandal-ridden Liberal government, the SDTC has become plagued by conflicts of interest as the corruptive nature of this government has taken hold of this organization. Let's take a look at the at-a-glance page of her report, and I quote, "Overall, we found significant lapses in SDTC's governance and stewardship of public funds, and that," and I quote, "SDTC did not sufficiently monitor the compliance with the contribution agreements between the Foundation and the Government of Canada." She found that the SDTC had awarded funding to projects that were ineligible, even though, and I quote, "they did not meet key requirements and where conflicts of interest existed." In total, $123 million worth of contracts were found to have been given inappropriately, with $59 million being given to projects that never should have been awarded any money at all. On top of this, the Auditor General discovered that conflicts of interest were connected to approval decisions. Because of this, nearly $76 million of funding was awarded to projects where there was a connection to the Liberal friends appointed to roles within SDTC, while $12 million of funding was given to projects that were both ineligible and had a conflict of interest. In fact, the Auditor General discovered that long-established conflict of interest policies were not followed in 90 cases. That must be a record for a single organization managing hundreds of millions of dollars.
Unbelievable.
In one instance, Trudeau's hand-picked SDTC chair, the Prime Minister's hand-picked CDTC chair siphoned off $217,000 to her own company.
Wow.
Madam Speaker, at a time when Canadians are struggling to pay their mortgages, put gas in their vehicles to go to work or feed their families, this Liberal government is doing what Liberals do best: wasting taxpayers' dollars.
Yep.
They make a big show of creating the appearance of doing something while blatantly disregarding the policies and rules in order to funnel money into the pockets of Liberal insiders.
Yep.
The Auditor General made it clear the blame for this scandal lies directly at the feet of this Prime Minister's industry minister, who did not sufficiently monitor the contracts that were being awarded to Liberal insiders. This minister utterly failed in his duty to protect the Canadian taxpayer. The Auditor General also released a damning report into the taxpayer-funded contracts that the Prime Minister awarded to his well-connected friends at McKinsey. The AG discovered that over the past few years, McKinsey has been awarded almost $200 million in contracts. 90% of the contracts awarded to McKinsey were given without following the appropriate guidelines. Are we seeing a pattern here, Madam Speaker? In many cases, it was unclear what the purpose of the contract was or if the desired outcome was even achieved. It gets better, Madam Speaker, or should I say worse. In one case, the Canada Border Services Agency saw that McKinsey did not qualify for a contract. So guess what they did? They revised the statement of work so that McKinsey could qualify. And that's not all. The Liberal government often sole-sourced these contracts directly to McKinsey and never even bothered to explain why a non-competitive process was justified. Can you even imagine? This is a multinational billion-dollar company. This is absolutely concerning. 70% of all contracts awarded to McKinsey were non-competitive. Worse still, in 13 out of 17, or 77%, of the contracts involving sensitive data given to McKinsey, the Liberal government allowed McKinsey to operate without the necessary security clearances. What is going on here? Why did the government go to such great lengths to break the rules? At that time, McKinsey was led by Dominic Barton. That might explain it. A close friend and advisor of the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. So I guess it should come as no surprise that they gave McKinsey hundreds of millions of dollars. Barton was the key figure in the Liberals' Advisory Council on Economic Growth and their Indo-Pacific Advisory Committee. It was also Barton's idea to create the failed, scandal-plagued Canada Infrastructure Bank. And it was Barton and McKinsey who had to pay nearly $600 million in damages for helping create the opioid crisis. Despite this, the Prime Minister appointed Barton as Canada's ambassador to China. And we cannot forget Arrive Scam and the damning Auditor General's report that came out in February of this year. A report that resulted from a motion put forward by Conservatives that called on the Auditor General to conduct a performance audit, including the payments, contracts, and subcontracts for all aspects of the ArriveCan app, and to prioritize this investigation. And what did she find? You guessed it. A glaring disregard for management practices and an inability to assess the true cost of this app, given the lack of information available to do a proper audit. An app that should have cost Canadians $80,000 but ballooned to $60 million and probably more. Madam Speaker, the outrageous spending habits of this government have put the futures of Canadians at risk. They have created a cost of living crisis, making it difficult for Canadians to put food on the table and a roof over their head. They have failed to deliver for Canadians on every level. A record 2 million Canadians are visiting food banks in a single month. Housing costs have doubled, mortgages have doubled, and over 50% of Canadians are $200 or less away from going broke. Yet, they continue to take any responsibility for their failed 9 years of governance. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, life has never been more difficult for Canadians. But for well-connected Liberal friends, life has never been so good. The Prime Minister turned Sustainable Development Technology Canada into a slush fund for Liberal insiders. This was made clear through a secret recording of a senior civil servant who slammed the outright incompetence of the Liberal government, calling the SDTC's actions a sponsorship scandal level kind of giveaway. Madam Speaker, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost and is not worth the corruption. It is incumbent on this House to shine light on the failures of this government and their corruption and deliver answers for Canadians. That is why I hope all members in this place will vote in favour of this motion that will deliver more transparency for Canadians. Madam Speaker, common sense Conservatives will end the corruption and fix the budget by firing high-priced consultants when we get elected. Thank you.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. L'honorable député Joliette.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to thank my colleague for that very powerful speech. We were in favor in principle, but we did have some concerns about the wording. But with the amendment that the Conservative Party introduced a few minutes ago, well, that's very relevant, and I think it's appropriate for us to support that. And I certainly hope the House will be able to pass this important motion. It's important to shed some light on what happened here. We were concerned about the 14-day period, but now the amendment will extend that and make it a longer period. We were also uncomfortable with the idea of Parliament recommending that the RCMP do something. I don't think it's our role as politicians to tell the RCMP what to investigate or to suggest that there were any offences committed. They're truly independent. They're supposed to be arm's length, the RCMP. But with the amendment that's been proposed, we are now in favour of the motion. We're comfortable with it now. And I would like to see us get to the bottom of this issue. Thank you.
I'm sorry. For Carleton Trail Eagle Creek.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I do appreciate the comments made by my honourable colleague. We look forward to this vote coming to this place and to seeing the support of the bloc. And I'm glad that we were able to address their concerns.
Questions et commentaires, l'honorable.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for La Petite Patrie. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her speech. I'd just like to remind her that this is the first time in Canadian political history that the first government that was ever found in contempt of Parliament was the government of Stephen Harper, because he refused to provide information or explanations about a piece of legislation. So it's all well and good to talk about transparency and accountability today, but there is a stain on the record of the Conservative Party, the previous Conservative government, when it comes to this same kind of thing. So yes, we in the NDP agree on the importance of transparency, and we have some doubts about the Liberals' willingness to be transparent. But what would she like to see done to make sure that all members and the public have all the information necessary? The Honourable Member for Carleton Trail.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have to say it is always rich to hear the NDP pretend to be an opposition party when they are more critical of other opposition parties than they are of this scandal-ridden government. The NDP leader and this member have sold out his party for a pension, and the polling reflects how Canadians feel about his decision. Today, that member has a chance to vote in favour of a motion that will actually hold this government to account. That's what we would like to see. That member support this motion to support getting to the bottom of this issue, to provide more transparency to Canadians. The only question is, will he do it?
Any commentaires, questions, and comments? The Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway on a point of order.
I've served with my honourable colleague for some time here, and I'm sure she didn't mean to cast this aspersion, but the phrase "sold out for a pension" would suggest that one of her colleagues in this place was trading their political beliefs or ideas for money. And I'm sure she wouldn't want that aspersion to be left. That, I think, is unparliamentary, and I would ask her to retract it.
Yeah. It may be subject to debate, but I don't think it's necessarily a point of order. So I'll leave it at that. Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for... Okay. The Honourable Member for Colchester, Cumberland, Colchester.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, I really appreciate my learned colleagues' comments here. And, you know, it would appear to me that this is an ongoing problem with a government that is not careful with other people's money, everybody's money in this entire country. And, you know, I wish that we were here debating something that was confined to the Green Slush Fund. It's clearly not. And I wonder if my honourable colleague would comment a bit about, you know, the lack of prudence with others' money that this government continues to portray to Canadians.
Member for Carleton Trail Eagle Creek.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, and I do thank my honourable colleague for that question. The fact is, Madam Speaker, numerous investigations have been taking place into the actions of this government and the departments that serve them, not only in regard to SDTC, but others, as I mentioned in my remarks. And some of those investigations are still underway, and some of those investigations are in fact being undertaken by the RCMP. The bottom line here is that to date, all, and I repeat, all of the reports that have been tabled have been damning to this government when it comes to how they are spending taxpayers' money and what they are allowing to continue. Glaring mismanagement, complete disregard for the rules, conflict of interest, and no value for money, Madam Speaker.